In the dead of night, high in the Ural Mountains, 9 young hikers slashed their way out of their tent, barefoot, half-dressed, stumbling into a blizzard at 30 degrees below zero. Hours later, searchers would find their bodies scattered across the snow, some with broken bones so violent it looked like a car crash, others with their eyes and tongues missing, their belongings untouched, their footprints vanishing into the dark. No enemies, no witnesses, no answers. To this day, no one truly knows what terrified them so much that they fled into the frozen night and never to return. But before the nightmare unfolded, it began like an adventure. 10 students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute set out on what should have been the proudest expedition of their young lives. Only 9 would continue past the first days, and none would return. January 23, 1959, 10 students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute planned a trek to Mount Otorten. Igor Dyatlov, leading them, had planned a journey through the northern Urals so brutally remote, so savage in its winter wrath, that only the most seasoned dared try it. Their goal was Grade 3, the highest certification then, for a trek of nearly 300 kilometers through snow, ridge, and storm. Their route, from Ivdal through the winter wilderness to Mount Otorten. The best of them, young engineers, athletes, outdoorsmen, they believed they were ready. One of them, Yuri Yudin, was not. Knee and joint pain, the cold setting in early, he was forced to turn back. That decision, painful at the time, became a twist of fate. Yudin would be the only living link to the final hours of the expedition. The rest, the 9, pressed onward. They carried cameras, diaries, maps. Their boots crunched across ice. Their breaths steamed in the frost. On January 31st, they reached the edge of highland terrain. Trees thinned. The forest retreated. Snow piled in drifts. By February 1st, 1959, they had pitched their tent high on the eastern slope of a mountain the local Monsi called Kolit Sayakal. In their language, it meant mountain of the dead. Cold seeped into bone. Wind carved into every exposed surface. They made camp. They cooked. They wrote in their journals. In photographs later recovered, they appeared vibrant despite the cold. Firelight, laughter, shared hot tea. When night fell, the temperature dropped. From the very beginning, the snowpack on that slope was a disaster waiting to happen. Underneath those fresh, powdery layers, a dangerously weak base, crystalline, porous, loaded with air pockets instead of solid support. And sitting right on top of it all is a heavy, dense layer of snow. Think of it like a solid slab balanced on a foundation of glass. Unstable, treacherous, and just waiting for something or someone to set it off. They leveled a spot to pitch the tent. In doing so, they cut away snow to flatten the ground. That cut triggered what scientists decades later would model mathematically as the weakening of the base layer, like a clock silently ticking. On the night of February 1st to 2nd, something terrified them. At some moment, the tent was slashed open from inside. Coats, shoes, equipment were left behind. Their light sources, lamps or torches, were abandoned. They fled into the cold. Some in socks, some barefoot, many without outerwear. When rescue failed to arrive by the promised February 12th telegram, anxiety grew. By February 20th, rescue teams were dispatched. Students, teachers, locals, police, military. They combed ridges, searched forests. But days passed with no sign. February 26th changed everything. Investigators arrived to a chilling scene. The tent, half collapsed, battered by the elements, and partially swallowed by snow. Inside, they found belongings scattered. Cameras, diaries, rucksacks. all abandoned in a rush. But the real shocker? The canvas had been torn open from the inside. The tent's flap wasn't unzipped or neatly opened. It was cut, as if, in a moment of panic, someone inside had desperately slashed their way out. Footprints led away from the tent. Some bare feet, some in socks, some with one boot, some with none. Then, as they neared the forest, they vanished under fresh snow. About 500 meters away, under a tall Siberian cedar, two bodies were found, Yuri Krivonishenko and Yuri Doroshenko. Almost naked, they had built a small fire. Their hands bore burns. Branches high above were broken off, suggesting one perhaps climbed in desperation, searching silently for shelter or for something lost. Between the cedar and the tent, 3 more corpses: leader Igor Dyatlov, Zina Kolmogorova, and Rustam Slobodin. Their positions told of panic and regression. Crawling toward the tent, perhaps trying to return, perhaps unable. Rustam's skull had a small crack. His injuries otherwise minimal, but chilling in implication. Weeks stretched. Snow buried everything. Melt came slowly. On May 4th, the still icy thaw exposed the last 4 bodies in a ravine, about 75 meters into the woods from the cedar. These 4 were dressed more warmly than some of the first found. Some wore the clothing of their comrades, outer layers swapped or taken after others died. What they found in those bodies read like a horror mapped out in anatomy. Ludmila Dubinina, missing her tongue, eyes gone, parts of facial tissue, eyebrows, lips, even skull fragments removed or decayed. Semyon Zolotaryov, eyes missing, chest shattered. Nikolai Thibault-Brignoles, skull damage. Alexander Kolevatov, severe trauma, ribs crushed, chests caved in. But external wounds were often minimal or absent. It was internal carnage of a brutal force. Clothing showed traces of radioactivity. Not massive contamination, low levels, but enough to fuel rumor, speculation, fear. Autopsies divided the dead. 6 declared dead of hypothermia. 3 killed by physical trauma. 1 had major skull damage. 2 had severe chest injuries. Investigators compared the force to that of a high-speed car crash. Yet, again, little external injury corresponding a crushing force inside out. When the Soviet inquest concluded, its verdict was vague. Death by a compelling natural force. No specific perpetrator, no human enemy, no supernatural force, no proof of a crime. The files were sealed, the area restricted, the evidence locked away. For decades, locals whispered. Books were written, theories multiplied. Among the many speculations, an avalanche, infrasound-induced panic, military testing, UFOs, a Yeti, radiological experiments, conflict with the Mansi people. None fit everything. The avalanche theory held weight. Snow, slope, winter conditions. But the slope where they pitched the tent was shallow, below angles that usually produce slides. No large debris field, no telltale signs. In recent decades, scientists Johann Gaum and Alexander Puzarin developed the delayed slab avalanche theory. They showed that a weak layer under a denser snow slab could destabilize after hours. That cut they made for the tent may have undermined support. Snow drift and wind loading above piled more weight until the weak base finally collapsed. A slab avalanche, relatively small, could crash onto them, forcing them from the tent in terror. That could explain crushed ribs, internal trauma, but not everything. The conditions that night were brutal. Temperature dropping to -25 degrees Celsius or lower, gusting wind, snowpack layered, darkness, The physics of snow unstable. Some theories attempt to explain the missing eyes and tongue by animals or decomposition. Bodies were found months later in water in running streams. Soft tissue decay fast in those conditions. But some wounds show hemorrhaging, meaning bleeding had occurred during life, not after death. That suggests those injuries happened while they were still alive or very soon after death. Meanwhile, reports exist of orange fireballs in the sky. Witnesses in the region claim lights moving rapidly above. Some believe missile or rocket tests overhead. Parachute mines have been proposed. Blast waves could generate internal injuries without obvious external damage. But nothing definitive connects those to the group's last hours. Another possibility: katabatic winds, cold, dense air rushing downhill, sudden gusts vicious as they skid across slopes. These could have battered the tent, cut off exits, forced them out in blind panic with breathing difficulty. If wind blew infrasound frequencies or low vibrations they couldn't consciously hear, the effect might be psychological, causing fear, hallucinations, irrational decisions. Yet none of these theories alone matches the full horror. Why the tent was cut from inside, not simply unzipped. Why the group dispersed instead of staying together. Why some bodies wore more clothing than others. Why no footprints of pursuers. Why the items inside the tent, food, cameras, valuables, were untouched. In 2020, Russian authorities reopened the case. Re-examined the terrain, photographed snowpack, studied weather. The Prosecutor General's office declared avalanche to be the official cause. But even that conclusion was qualified, admitting many anomalies could not be explained. Families of the dead remained unsatisfied. The mountain Kholat cycle rises silently still. It remains remote. Dead Mountain, they called it. Not because they expected death, but because death came anyway. 6 died under the cold's embrace, 3 crushed from an unseen force, 1 missing tongue, multiple missing eyes. Radiation. These are not myth. These are cold, hard facts. Decades have passed. Books written. Expeditions returned. Snow melted, then died again by winter. The region remained closed for some years. The tent itself, studied, worn away, stored then discarded. Tonight we consider them, the 9 voices silenced on a mountain. Tent slashed, a scream caught in snow, a darkness in the cold. Perhaps the avalanche was real. Perhaps the wind, the snow, the physics conspired. Perhaps the radiation, the strange injuries, the odd wounds had simpler causes than conspiracies. Or worse, maybe never will be fully untangled. 9 lives lost, a mystery frozen in time, and a mountain that still refuses to give up its secrets. If stories like this send chills down your spine, and you want more of the world's darkest, unsolved tragedies, then subscribe. Because here, every story we uncover brings us closer to the shadows most people never dare to look into.